Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the first Dorico 4 live stream, with features to supercharge your workflow. Today, I'm going to be giving you a whirlwind tour of many, but not all, of the new features in Dorico 4. This is the first big, and it is a big update, since May 2020, and unlike what Boris was doing then, this is a work event. As always, let me know if the audio is okay. I have one eye on the chat, but Daniel and some of my colleagues will also be in the chat answering your questions. And click on the little cog at the bottom of the screen if you need to change the video resolution, slow me down, anything like that. So grab a cup of tea or coffee. Popcorn is optional. And if you're not ready, press pause. And now you're back. Let's get started. So, first thing, this affects everybody. The licensing. There's a new licensing system. There is no more USB e-licenser or soft e-licenser. You don't need those anymore. Also, with the new licensing, you also get the chance to run Dorico if you want to on up to 3 computers. So with one Dorico license, you can run Dorico on 3 computers. In fact, if I move a bit, you can see there's 3. Anyway. So if you have one at home and a desktop at home and one in another location, in another room, in an office, then you can use that one. And of course, you can use a laptop as well. So you can run on up to 3 computers. And it's also now Apple Silicon native for M1 processors. So if you have any of the new Macs, then Dorico is now natively running on the M1 processors. Just watch out if you do have any third-party VST plugins, that kind of thing, then they may also need to run in Rosetta, but Dorico itself is Apple Silicon native. So the first item on the Supercharge Your Workflow, if I flick over to this screen, well, let's have a look at some of the new features. So to start off with, this is the new Dorico Hub. So when you start Dorico, the new Steinberg Hub, in the Learn section, it looks very much like the iPad, actually. We've got some hands-on tutorials for the desktop version here. We've got the new videos, so if you want to look at any of Anthony's brilliant new videos on Dorico 4, and we've got some blog items here. So, for example, if you want to find out lots of the detail about it, you can click on that one for the blog articles. There's also a link to the manual with some updates for version 4, and the forum if you want to ask us any questions and get in touch with us. Let's go start with the Open Recent section, and I'm going to start with a MIDI file and how we can look at the new options. So when you import a MIDI file in Dorico, this is the new import dialog, and it's showing me the instruments that are in this at the moment. So there's actually no MIDI track names on this one, but that's okay. So we have the instruments that we're going to import into this file. And also, if you do have MIDI track names, then Dorico has a use track memory, so it can work out and remember, for example, if you've got a file from a DAW which says sf sim str vln.1 pleg, and it's a Spitfire symphonic strings violin something. If you've imported that with that MIDI track name once because it's in your Cubase template, or the DAWs are available, then if you tick that box, then Dorico will remember next time it sees that track name what you've mapped it to. So that will save you a whole heap of time importing your other templates. So the use track memory, at the moment we're just using interpret as general MIDI because this is just a file from Tinternet. So you can see the destination instrument that we're going for, also the maximum number of simultaneous notes that each part has. So the piano has 5 notes, so it will be playing chords at various times. And also this violin or string staff also has 5. And you can see the total number of notes as well. In the advanced editor, I'm going to choose the piano here, and it says that the piano is going to use the new voice separation mode. So there's a new option to separate out the various notes that the piano is playing into multiple voices as the MIDI file is opened, so that you don't have to do the manual work of splitting those out later. The violin section here, and you can, this has 2 heads because it's a section player. If I double click, then I can make it a solo or a section, and there's a button over here for it as well. But the violin track is actually also 5 notes. So what I want to do here is separate it out. So I'm going to say, actually, I want to do 2 violins and a viola and a cello and a double bass. So I'm going to split this track. As Dorico opens the file, it'll split that track out into 5 instruments, and you can see which instruments it's using on the right hand side. If you're going the other way around, if you've got a file from your DAW and your violin track is actually split over multiple tracks, so one of them is shorts, one's longs, one's staccato, one's legato or something else, then you can choose each of those, you can assign the articulations to those, and you can also, in this dialog, amalgamate them into a single player so that you can bring all of those tracks into one player. Maybe we'll look at that in a future Discover Dorico session. At the bottom of this dialog, We have some import options, so Dorico can detect whether the key signature is missing, detect slurs, tremolos, trills, those kind of options. There's a few other options in here as well that were in previous versions. The quantize options, as well as your normal quantize options, also have detect grace notes if you want to use it, and you can also filter out key switches if they're not actually wanted on the import, because you're going to be using expression maps to control those. So I'll open this file. Dorico will now open this one, and as I said, it will split out those string staves. So here's the file open. So we've got all the right labels at the beginning because it worked those out. And I said if it was a random track name that you've imported from a DAW, you can also have mapped that so you don't have to sort out the instruments on the way in. You can see the piano part actually. There's maybe a bit of editing that's required here, but it's relatively clean. There's some new options, for example, when you're editing voices that would be very useful here. So, for example, if I click on a note, when you're inputting notes, you can press Shift-V to create a voice. And because here we already have the voices assigned, because we have upstem and downstem, you can now just select a note. I'm going to change the length of that note, and I'm just going to press V, which will toggle it into a different voice. So you can do this kind of thing and quickly tidy up things that way without having to specify exactly where it's going. Just press V, it will toggle into the other voice. You've still got, of course, things like your requantize options. So here, to tidy up the strings, if I requantize these, then I can tidy up things like this, as I did before. But also in this, the requantize also includes detect grace notes. So if I do that, then I get a grace note at the beginning here, because there was a particularly short note at the beginning. Also, in the kind of the look of things in Dorico and how things work, some things are a little bit more like the iPad version, if you've tried and used that one. So the lower panel, or we're now calling it the lower zone at the bottom of the screen here, it has the properties section in it, as it did before. There's also a new option, or several new options over here, which includes the key editor. So the key editor here, now I've got this open, and I've got this little chain, this little link symbol, is this button is turned on. So if I click on any notes in the score, you'll see that the key editor will now jump and change to that instrument and show me what's selected. So if you want to make a MIDI edit to any of these, so any of these notes I was changing before, this was originally a much longer note and you wanted to make it shorter, for example, you could have done that also in the key editor in this lower zone. This is also where you'll find the automation and CC options. So this is showing me note velocities at the moment, and there's a histogram for that as well, which also came over from the iPad version. And also the other MIDI CC lanes are in here. So if you wanted to edit anything, or there's a pencil tool here if you want to draw in any MIDI CC messages and that kind of thing, then you can also add those in this zone as well. So it's all very useful things that potentially and in previous versions were in play mode, but now it's sometimes just easier to have it in the same screen as well, and you can have it if you want in play mode as well. Also in this lower section, let's have a quick look. So there's a piano option, so this is showing me the note I've highlighted here. There's also, and you can use this for note input. If you have a Surface Pro or something like that, maybe you want to use the touch interface for that. Maybe it's a visual aid if you're a teacher and you're trying to show what's going on the screen. You can use it for note input, as I said, and you can just tap on the screen if you want to. Similarly for the fretboard, so here we have a bass guitar fretboard. If I click on one of the electric guitars up here, then we have a 6-string fretboard. If you use Capos, which hopefully I'll get to later, then they will also display on the fretboard. So Capos are now supported on there. And if we switch over to the drum pads and click on a drum staff, then you'll see all of the drum pads in here, which you can use them for input if you want to input notes that way. Also at the bottom, there's a new mixer. So the new mixer can be displayed down here in this zone, and this is resizable. And whether you're showing it or not, you can also press F3 still for the mixer. So the mixer is now redefined in Dorico. This is, it's resizable, and for one of these instruments, for example, you can choose inserts. So here, there's a couple of new inserts. So there's a VST amp rack and there's a VST bass amp rack. So if you want to choose an amplifier and a British custom amp head or anything else, or cabinet, you can choose all of those, and you can choose the pedals you want in here, and choose a pedal and set all of those kind of things up should you want to use them. So that's all available in the mixer. Related to playback, play mode has also been redone. So let's just close the lower zone for a second. So in here you can see we have where any of the tracks appear, they will scroll into view. You can view these in 3 different sizes. Just click on this button here and it will show you them in different sizes. When you select any of these, again, if you have the lower panel open, you can use the key editor if you want to. So if that's the way you're used to working and you want to use it in play mode, it's still all there, no problem with that. There's also on the left-hand side here, here's the routing information. So for the instrument I've selected, it's showing me what that's routed to. There's a little E for the edit to open the Hallian interface if you want to get to that. Independent routing of voices. There's also the insert effects are shown in here, and the channel fader is shown in here. So it's a little bit more like using Cubase, where you've got all of those things on the left-hand side where you maybe expect them. This is also where you'll find the VST rack. So if you have multiple instances, you might have multiple Hallians, Note Performer, BBC SO, anything else in there, Contact, they will appear in this list, and then also your MIDI instruments, so if you're using external MIDI devices. So these are all the things that used to be on the right-hand side, they're now on the left-hand side. So the shortcuts for all of these are still the same. So, Command 8, Control 8 to open and close the lower zone, etc., etc. There's also these buttons at the top for the marker track, if you want to show or hide that, and the tempo track, and the chord track, and all of those things are also there as well. So let's just jump back to write mode and have a look at some other new things in here for kind of navigating around and that kind of thing. I'm just going to jump into galley view here. So I've got one long continuous stream of music and the instruments shown. And a new option you can see up here in the top left corner is this instrument filter. And if you go to the view menu, you can toggle this on and off if you want it. It's the instrument filter overlay. So let's say I only want to be working on, for example, the piano and alto saxophone. So I've just control or command selected a couple of instruments, select as many as you want, press the little plus and it will add those to a filter and it will filter those instruments. So you can see I've now got a dotted line here that's showing me that some of the instruments aren't being shown. You might say, well, I could do that with a layout previously. I could make a new layout that contains those two instruments. Yes, you could, and you still can, no problem. But in this version, if you play it in this, you'll still hear all of the instruments, even though you're only editing these two. So you can still hear everything that's going on, but you're only actually looking at and seeing these two instruments. You can also set up some other filters. So if I click on the tiny little three dots up here, then I get this manage instrument filters, and I can add other filters into here as well. So maybe I'm just kind of setting up some of the filters or anything else. But Dorico can also help you out with creating these. So you can just press the little plus down here to add presets from the instrument families. So the alto sax is the only woodwind, so that's gone in its own one. The drums is the only percussion, that's gone in its own one. The guitars and bass, they've gone into one. The piano and the strings. So you can see they're numbered down the left-hand side. So this is now instrument filter number 6. And this is instrument filter number 5. And you can resort these, so you can move these up or down depending on which number you prefer them to be, and you can edit what's in them. So now you want to use some of those, you can use them from this drop down, so you could jump to one of these filters if you wanted to. But there's also other ways of navigating now in Dorico. So if you just press the letter J, then you get this, which is our jump bar. So it's a little bit like using, if you're a Mac user, a spotlight, if you like, I suppose. There's two options here, go to and commands. On a Mac, you use Control, not Command, Control 1 for commands and Control 2 for go to. So 1 and 2. On a PC, it's Alt-C for command and Alt-G for go to. So you can do things like go to bar B 34, and it will go to bar 34, or go back to bar 17. Oops, need to press J. B bar 17. So you can use that, and you can say F for flow. You can jump to a specific flow if you want to. So if you have a work with multiple flows and you want to jump to flow 13, you can do that in there as well. You can also jump to rehearsal marks. So if you use things like R, you can jump to RJ, so rehearsal mark J. So that's the go-to options. And then there's the commands options here as well. And you can have things like the instrument filters in here. So this, you can run all sorts of commands in Dorico. If you have a command in a menu somewhere you might want to run, then you can use this. So let's say you want to run instrument filter preset 2. It will run instrument, which was only the alto saxophone, if you remember. And if you want to go back into here and say, actually, I'd like number 3, then it's just the drums. And number 4 was only the guitars. But you might say, well, I don't want to have to type that every time. So if you type this in and then you say equals, you can set yourself a shortcut. So you can say I4. So now I only have to go jump bar, I6, because I've already set that one. I6, you see it says here, is instrument filter preset 6. So that's my strings. You could have called it strings. You could press J, strings, and you'll just see the strings. You can set your own little option in there. What's the difference between that and setting a key command? It's just another option. Key commands will also show up in here if you want to use them that way, and it might remind you of what some of the shortcuts are that you've maybe previously set before. So for example, if I select all of these notes here and say J, extend to next note, you can see I've set an EX jump bar command and I've set a shortcut for it. So probably I should have used one of those, but I can run it from there as well. It doesn't matter. It's just another way of running all of those commands should you want to do it that way. And in the key command section in preferences, you can then set, do you want this to be you can see all of the shortcuts and things you've set, so you can add, remove, change any of the shortcuts, key commands in there as well if you want to. So that's the jump bar for navigating and running commands and all sorts of things, and I think you're going to have a lot of fun with that one, and it's a very useful option. Now I'm just going to go into a new file and let's have a look at kind of some of the setup things and some of the new edit things. So in this Steinberg Hub we have create new, we have all of the templates that you would have noticed before. It looks very similar again to the iPad version, and you can now save your own templates. So if you want to make a new folder that sits down here, we'll get onto that in a bit, but you can do it. You can save your own templates to appear in this window. I'm just going to choose an empty template at the moment, but I can still, if I want to, add a project title. If I can type today, probably not. So I'm going to add a title, put me as a composer. I could change the staff size if I wanted to. I could say if it's going to use multiple flows and then it will turn on flow headers, or maybe not today. You can choose the music and the text font, so maybe you want a different text font for this piece. And if you want it, you can have a time signature and key signature. I quite like just starting in Dorico with one beat rest. Some people prefer to have some bars to start with, so here's an option to set them. And then you just press create project, and Dorico will create that. Of course, there's no instruments, there's no players. You'll notice possibly that it says add single player instead of solo player. There's a different option for soloists, which hopefully I'll get time to show you as well. So there's add single player, add section player, same shortcuts as before, Shift P, Shift Alt P, and add ensembles. In add ensembles, this is more like the iPad version. You can choose the ensemble, but you can also use the builder. So you can say, for example, 2231, which, I mean, you can just type flute, oboe, and type that in as well, but you can use the orchestral shorthand. Because I need to get as many options in as possible and show you things, I quite like this one. So this is giving me 2231, standard orchestral shortcut for 2 flutes, 2 oboes, 3 clarinets and a bassoon. And then I'm going to type string as well, or start typing string, and it's going to give me a string section. So you can also set up in here your own ensembles of whatever combination of instruments you want. Maybe at your band or your church or whatever, you have an ensemble which is a unique combination that you want to use a lot. You can now save your own combinations of ensembles in here and give them your own shortcut. So I'm just going to press add, and it will add all of the instruments I've chosen. In fact, I wanted to add strings and I didn't finish typing strings, so I'm saying actually, can I have a string section as well, please? No problem. I also wanted a piano. So I'll add a piano. So we'll just do Shift P, piano, as we did before. Now Dorico has put this now in orchestral order because there's a button down here which I can right-click on or I can long press on, and it's ticked for orchestral. So it's automatically sorting the instrument into orchestral order. Hooray, at last. So now we need let's put some notes and things to work on in here. So in the strings, I'm just going to do Shift down arrow as before. I'm going to just put some notes in from a MIDI keyboard. That'll do. So we've got something to start with, and maybe you're doing something for piano like, I don't know, this kind of thing. So what I was talking about with voices before, there's no voice, there's only one voice here. There's no extra voices in here. So if I press Shift V, it will make me a new voice, even though the caret isn't already on. I hope you're all existing Dorico users. I'm editing, but I didn't need the caret on to do that. So this one here, I can just literally press V and it will move it into a downstem voice. So this kind of editing is much quicker. You can still do the same kind of things, of course, with copying to or moving to staff below and those kind of things. So they're all the same. But when you're using one of Dorico's superpowers, if you like, insert mode, sometimes it would cause people issues. So here's how we've changed some things with customer feedback for insert mode. So I'm going to say, let's say in this bar here, I wanted to insert some music. So as before, I press the letter I for insert, or I press the button on the left-hand side. I'm now in insert mode. Now, if I was to put some new notes in here, it's going to push those notes out of the way, but also, just if I go back into galley view so we can see what's going on over the page, it's also moving these notes, so they're no longer in alignment with where they were. So edits that you made in insert mode could be really good, but if you already had music later on, it could cause you some issues. So let's just undo that for a minute. So what we want to do now is, and you can do this in either the system track, if you want the system track, Alt-T is the shortcut for the system track. There's a little stop option up here, which puts you this red line. Or if you don't have the system track on, you can press Shift-Alt-I, and that will move the stop line to whatever you have selected. So if I have a note selected, or if I have a bar line selected, then it can it will put the stop line in at that point, and the same shortcut will turn it off. So now if I make some changes in insert mode here, so exactly the same as I did before, you see it's changing this bit, but it'll only change it up to the stop line. You can't get past that red line, so you're not going to interrupt or change or make a mess of any of the other music that you've got later on. So that's the first thing with insert mode, is you've got a stop point where you can say, actually, please don't mess up any of the music later on. If you have something in a couple of voices, and maybe if we also had a dynamic in here, then one of the things you may also have found, I mean, you're probably not likely to have done this, maybe this is more likely in the piano, but go with it. When you were using insert mode previously, it would only insert into one voice. So you see this voice hasn't moved and the dynamic hasn't moved. So let's just undo that. So now over here on the left-hand side, we've got 4 options for insert mode. So if I choose the second one, then it's now, you see it's extended this, it's got some dotted lines at the bottom. If I now put some notes in here, it's moving everything. It's everything in this player is moving, whether it's multiple voices, whether it's the dynamics, anything like that, it's all moving to make space and add those in. So that could be a very useful option. And again, the stop line is still not, it's still making sure we don't interrupt anything later on. So that's the second option. You can also toggle through all of these options using Alt-I. So the third option, if I press Alt-I, is it's now going to insert into all of the people, all of the players in this. So we've got single voice, as before, everything for that player, and the third option is for everybody. So I'm now going to input some notes in here, and it's going to insert time also for all of the other strings and everybody else as well, because of using that extra mode. And then there's a fourth option. Yes, there's another one. So I press it again, it's now going to increase the length of the bar. So if I move to the end of this bar and say, actually, I would like to input some music at the end of this bar, it's now extending this bar that I'm working in, and you can see also the time signature is updating. There's some input preferences to decide, do you want the time signature to update? Do you want it to update and hide itself? Or if you're doing choral works or a cadenza and you don't actually care what the time signature is, you can just say, just change the length of the bar, but don't worry about it. Don't tell me anything about it. That's fine. So there's some note input options that you can also use for that. So you can see now what's happening is there's 4 options, and just check out either what this icon is showing you over here. You can long press or you can right click on it to choose any of the other options, and you can toggle insert mode on and off with I, and you can change the options and move around them all with Alt-I to get all of the different options. And the caret, where you're inputting notes, will always tell you what the difference is, so which mode are you in. So there's a whole bunch of new things for insert mode based on users' feedback when they were using it to say, you know what would be really handy, and also please don't interrupt and delete the music that I was already creating. So there you go. So that's insert mode. There's also some other options that we can use for anything you're doing composition wise. So let's take these notes here, and in the right menu now we have transform. So we have pitches, so you can invert, reverse, rotate, map, all those kind of things, repeat pitches. We also have some rhythm options to reverse rhythms and rotate rhythms, and we have an all section. Let's have a look at a couple of these. So let's say, for example, you can map pitches to a specific scale, or you can map a scale. So you can say, I was in this scale and I want to go to a different scale. You can rotate, you can retrograde, all of those kind of things. And they're also all available using Shift-I, which is the intervals popover. It's now a bit more than that. So in this one, for example, if I said I wanted to do an inversion, so I can type inv, then it will invert those, and you could choose if you wanted to what the inversions are in the dialogue. You can also do it in the popover with some various other commands, and you can do things like Shift I and say, actually, I'd like to go from major to locrian, and you can do that in the popover if you want to. So you can do that with maybe a retrograde. So you've got lots of options now for musical manipulation or transformations that you might want to do in there. So have a look, and if that's of interest, there's a lot more information in the version history document. The version history file is now something like 103 pages long. This is a big update, but there's a big section in there on lots of different commands you can type, lots of things you can do, mapping to a scale, but not a particular a particular note, or there's all sorts of things in there that you can use. So I'm sure you'll have a lot of fun with all of those. Another option that is very useful when you're doing edits for things, if I just create some, it's not really music, but it will some bars with some notes in for a minute, and let's say we're doing this over multiple people. So I'm just going to use my, I've had for a while a duplicate to staff below shortcut. If you haven't made one, you might want one. So let's say we'll take some of this music and we're going to say that we'll add some articulations to this. So let's just add some random articulations. So we've got some different ones. This kind of thing. Well, that's another one. So now if I make a selection here, the problem is that I've added all the notes down here previously. Maybe it's a MIDI import, maybe it's just the way you work, that's fine. And I can now copy this music. In fact, let's just prove it's different by moving it somewhere else. So the music is going to be different. And then I'm going to press copy, and I'm going to go to the staves down here, and instead of paste, I'm going to use a right-click paste special called paste articulations. And paste articulations is going to paste in the articulations of the thing I've selected. You notice I just selected the wrong bar then when I ran that shortcut, didn't I? So I'll do paste special, and I'll paste articulations. There we go. So it's now saying, well, look, I've selected back to here, so it's taking in some of that into consideration as well. So let's do this properly. I'll select one bar and show you an option for that, for starters. So it depends on where you've selected into, but because it's a paste special option or a paste articulations, then it also pays attention to where the beats are. So if you're missing a note, it won't bother. It's going to paste them all into exactly where you've selected. And because it's a paste special, you can use it later. So you can say later on, actually, I wanted to start. Let's say you want to start somewhere different on this note here, and for these two, and do paste special. Then you can still use this shortcut to paste in the same articulations that you had because they're on the clipboard. So for articulations and that kind of thing, it's a very useful option to normally not to do this, to copy the same information down to the same the same notes, copy the articulations down to those other instruments. I mentioned capos earlier, but we need some chord symbols first. So if I select some notes from here, there is an option in Edit, Notations, Chord Symbols and Diagrams, Generate Chord Symbols from Selection. But it might be easier because when you right-click, it's now a bit more context-sensitive as to the type of things you might actually be able to do. Chord Symbols and Diagrams has Generate Chord Symbols from Selection in here. If you use it a lot, set a shortcut for it. So this will now generate chord symbols from the notes we've already put in. You can choose all sorts of options in here as to exactly what you'd like, how often you want the chord symbols, do you want open fifths? There's all sorts of options in here. So I'll just press OK, and I now have chord symbols. I've put them on the strings. Maybe I didn't really want them on the strings. I wanted them on the piano, but of course they're global items, so the piano gets the chord symbols as well because it's a rhythm instrument. For individual changes to chords, in the Properties panel, there's now a parenthesized option if you need to parenthesize a chord for some reason. But also, if you're using things like capos, and I'll get onto that in a second, then for capos and those kind of things, you can automatically parenthesize all of those at the same time, if that would be useful. If you have things like these string sections, but you want to kind of bracket them all together, so maybe you've got multiple string sections, you need to label them A and B or anything else like that. In setup mode, if I make a selection of a number of instruments, I can add them all into a group, which I could do before, but now adding a group and changing the group name, let's just call them strings, well now you can add a bracket on the left-hand side here as well. So if you add a bracket, that's because in layout options now for our staves and systems, we have a show player group names. So if I toggle this off, then it will go away, and if I put it back on, it will come back. And there's an engraving option as to do you want the name to be inside the bracket or joined with the bracket like it is now? Do you not want the bracket there at all? You just want the name to be displayed that way around. So there's that option for the vertical text. There's also this option for show player name instead of instrument name, and this would be useful if I had maybe a percussionist and we'd given him a bass drum, a triangle, and a tambourine or whatever. You get those instrument names normally at the beginning of the staff in Dorico. And now you can say, actually, if you want to show the player name instead, so you just want to call it percussion, then you can do that. So in setup mode, when you've added it, you can right-click and you can rename the player and give it a short name and a long name that you want to appear on the score at the beginning there, which is different from the instruments that they're playing inside, which would then get the instrument changes. So there's that option for percussionists as well. If you have music that's happening that's very, very similar for a number of bars, like I was doing this, or maybe this is for a drum part or that kind of thing, then you can also, let's go into the part and do this. You can say from the articulations were different on here, so we'll start on this one here. You can now make a selection of a range and say, I would like a create bar numbered bar region. So now it will say that this bar they're all the same, and you can choose in the preferences and engraving options, do you want these to be above or below? Do you want this little number to tell you how many bars you're going to be playing the repeats for? Do you want all of the numbers in brackets? There's lots of options there for what you're doing. Maybe they're most useful actually in drum parts or most common in drum parts where you've got drum rhythms and actually you're writing out the rhythm, but you're saying it's the same for the next X number of bars. Numbered bar regions may be very useful for that one for you. So another option, I guess, probably more a kind of publishing type option, but can also be used sometimes for a bit of fault finding. And it's based on this new menu at the top, which is the library menu. So what we've done is we've taken engraving options, layout options, notation options, those things which were normally in the bottom of those individual menus. So in Engrave menu, there was an engraving options. In the setup menu, there was layout options. In write mode, there was notation options, those kind of things. We've now put them all together in the library menu, which is always there. So you can find them. Now, the shortcuts you could always run from any mode anyway. So that's a very useful option to do, but you can now get at them. They're a bit more discoverable in the library menu. I suppose there's various other interface things that are a bit more discoverable as well. So things like there's these little dots on some of these icons which just tell you actually if you click and hold or right click, there are other options for voices here. There are other options for dotted notes. There are other options for tuplets. Those kind of things. And also on the right hand side, you can run these panels in a couple of different modes, like on the iPad now. So this panel here on the right-hand side, you can pop it out if you want to, but if you click on the keyboard, then all of these items will run just like firing the popover with a shortcut. So dynamics, for example, will just open the popover. So there's a few interface tweaks and things like that, but so in the library menu, we've now got all of the things to do with the fonts and the paragraph styles and lines menus and things like that, and the expression maps and engraving options. And at the bottom, there's a library manager. So if we load the library manager, what this is doing is telling me what's in this project that I have open now, and it's comparing it to what the factory settings are for Dorico. So now I can see, and if I just choose differences, it would just tell me the differences in engraving options between my project that I have open and the factory settings in Dorico. So, for example, I tend to have show wings on repeat bar lines set, and so that's appeared in this one because it's in my user library. And I could compare this file to the user library, but there are no differences because I haven't made any changes yet. This could also be useful if you're comparing a file from somebody else. You can open their file and you can say, actually, what do they have their accidental gaps set to? What do they have their lyric options set to? What do they have their bar lines set to? But to start off with, the file I've got open, it's comparing it to the factory Dorico settings, out the factory, or you can compare to your user library. You can also, if you drag in another Dorico file, so if I just grab one off my desktop and stick it in this box here, now I can compare this project to another Dorico project. So I might have a project open, which maybe has lots of the options in it I want, but I remember there were some options I used in a previous project, and I wanted to import those, but I can't remember what all of the options were. I can drag this in now, and it's comparing the open project here with the one I've just dropped in here, Lullaby of Birdland, which I dropped in the box. So now this is telling me the differences between my two projects, and if I want those options, so let's say if I go to the paragraph styles, I can now see all of the paragraph styles that are different between these two projects. So for example, if I click on title, then it's showing me that the title was different to the one I'm using now. And actually, if I expand this, I can see exactly what the options are. So one's using Petaluma script and one's using Academico, for example. And I can choose to import or not the options from one to the other. And I can now selectively do that. So it's not like saying, I want to import all of the options from that. I don't actually want all of the options. I just want to see what some of the options are, and I just want to import a few. Maybe you've made some tweaks to slurs, and you just want to import those tweaks to slurs that you've done in another project, but you don't want all of the options from the other project, so you can choose those. Now, if you want all the paragraph styles, click on this option at the top. It'll import all the paragraph styles. If you just want titles, just click on the title, and when you press apply, it will then apply just the options you've chosen to the project. So this has only changed the title of that based on the other project, and not any of the other text items or anything else. So the library manager, really useful for publishers for looking at templates or saying, we've got that thing we set in that other template or in that other project that we would really like to import into this one. You can import that one, make it a very, very useful option. And when you've set a template exactly how you want it, maybe you've also, I mentioned soloists. Let's say we've also added a core Engrave to this file. Here we go. So it's in the woodwind section. If I right click on this and just do soloist, then the I didn't want my groups, did I? Let's remove all of these for a minute and show you proper orchestral orders for things, and put my strings back. There we go. So I've now got a solo core Engrave, and if I tick or untick this, then without messing around with all the others, then I now have an orchestral order, and I can just tell it it's a soloist and say, yeah, great, and it will appear above the strings. So you've set this up, you've got the template how you want it, you've said, yes, maybe you don't want these chord symbols in there or notes, but what you want to do is then go to Save as Project Template, and if you click Save as Project Template, you can add it into a folder, optionally, give it a name, and it will appear in the New from Project Template menu, and it will also appear in the Hub, which is where we started at the beginning, in the Steinberg Hub, so you can then start your new project with the correct instruments that you want it in there. So that and the library manager gives you two workflow options for how do you want to kind of start with all of your settings. Do you start a project and import some of the library options that way, or do you start from a template? Your choice. So on to a couple of other new options and things in Dorico. Let's have this file. I've dragged in a new file, or told Dorico to open a new file, and what it says is, do you want to activate the project for playback? I'm going to say no at the moment. So the little power button that's always existed at the top of Dorico has never done anything before. It's a nice icon. Now it does. So if you press the power button, it will now load all of the instruments that you have for this project. And if you don't, then you can open the project without loading any of the sounds. So if you haven't got any sounds and you're wondering why your playback isn't working, make sure the power button is on, because then it will load the sounds for that project. You also get an option in the preferences. You can say always load the sounds please for my project, or you can say ask me, like mine is, ask me if I want to at that point, or you can say never, no, and I'll choose when I want to put them on. So sometimes if you're copying and pasting between projects and you don't want Dorico to reload the sounds each time, you can leave one project active, but edit and do things in another, or copy and paste out of one and into another, and that will help you. So in this project, we just have one guitar. So in setup mode, we've got one guitar. And as we did before in Dorico, we've got the notation shown and we've got the tab shown. But we've also got Capos shown. So if I go up to setup mode here and right-click on my guitar player, then the chord symbols for this player also now have options for whether the capo will be shown above or below the main chord symbols. At the moment, mine are shown above. There's also the capo chord symbol definition. So in here, you can choose what you want the capo to be. Capo at the third fret in this case. And that will then put the chord symbols in above or below as you've selected. If you're in write mode when you're editing and doing any of this, in fact, let's do this in the tab. I said you'll see the capo here as well on the guitar fretboard on the screen. And you also have some options where if you really want to, you can show the notation here. If we go into layout options, in the player's fretted instruments section, you can use fretted instrument transposition. So if I tick this little box, let's just move this out of the way slightly, then you'll see then the notes will be transposed. So they are now showing the notes for the transposed chords and the transposed key. And if I untick that, then it will go back to the concert chords, the concert key in here. There's also some options when you're using chord symbols now, if you want them, to say that for chord symbols and diagrams, you can show fingerings inside the chord diagrams. So let's just move that over slightly. So if I press apply here, then in this one, you've got now tiny little numbers. You might want to make your guitar frames a bit bigger, but you can now put the numbers in automatically, and you can put them inside the dot, or you can put them at the end of the string. And you can also do the save that show the chord diagrams at the start of the flow if you wanted to use that option as well. But the new fingering option is also now available, so we'll add the fingering into all of those should you want them. I think that was, oh yes, one more thing. I knew there was one more thing. If you're setting this kind of thing up as well, for each guitar instrument, because the guitarist may have, apparently guitarists sometimes buy more than one guitar, you can do edit strings and tuning, and in here you can also set up the tuning in here. So here's where you can set up the capo, a full capo or a partial capo if you want it, and you can say which strings the capo is on and that kind of thing. So you can set all of this up as well if you want it for the tab. So quite comprehensive options there, and like I said, there's a display option. If you just search in engraving options for the word capo, then in the chord symbols section for capo, you can switch whether you want your capo chord symbol appearance to be italics or parenthesized, and what the gap is between the chords and the main symbol. And for the parentheses options, there's various options for when you want the parentheses to be to exist, that kind of thing. So they're all in engraving options should you want those. There's a whole bunch of other things. I'm running out of time, so I'll use this one. So do I want to activate? No, it's fine. I'm not going to play this one back right now. So here we have a lead sheet, that a quick lead sheet done, and there's an option in another notation program, begins with F, that we actually like. So we've borrowed it. So in Engrave mode, what you could do previously is you could say, I'd like a system break. I'd like to put a system break here. I'd like this bar to be on the next line, please. So you could choose a bar line, you could add a system break. But if you were saying things like, I would like this bar to be on the previous line, then what do? Actually, now I've clicked on an item as well, you'll notice we've got these little crosshairs in Engrave mode. So when you move things around, then the item has a crosshair, so you can now line it up exactly with the with anything else you want, with the stem of the note or the other chords or anything else. So lots of items that you now select in Engrave mode, you get crosshairs. Anyway, I want to move this bar into the previous line. What you would have had to do previously is select from here to here and then use the make into system. Or you select everything you want to be on one frame and say make into frame. What you can now do is use these, move to previous system and move to next system. And they're available as just shortcuts. So on your keyboard, the greater than, less than symbols, which on mine is comma and full stop. So I can use comma to move to the previous system. So if I just press that, then it will move that bar onto the previous system. It will put the system breaks in for me, and that kind of thing if I need them. And if I just undo that and I want to move, for example, this bar, let's say, down to the next line, I can just press full stop or period, and it will move it down to the next one. So very quickly, maybe it's an orchestral score and you're kind of looking through and you think, that bar needs to be on the previous page. You can just, in Engrave mode, press comma and it will jump that bar or onto the next page. So it's a very, very quick way of kind of looking through everything page by page or system by system and moving something to the correct item. And as I said, it's an item we liked from another notation program. There's also an option if you're working on parts in setup mode now, you can choose a part over here on the right hand side. You can right click and do duplicate layout. This is useful if you've maybe set up a part in C and you want a part in B flat. Very little changes, you want all of the same engraving, all of the same options, all of the same spacing, everything that you've done, you just want to duplicate the layout. You can duplicate the layout here, and then maybe you use the clef and transposition overrides and just change the transposition of that one to be in B flat or E flat or whatever key you need. So duplicate layout is a new option in Dorico 4. We're not doing too badly. So I mean, we don't have time to tell you really today about, there's some new tools for respelling accidentals, and when writing atonal music, what do you want to do with with accidentals there? There's some note input options for those as well. There's comprehensive support for bracketing in figured bass. So if you need to use those, then they exist. Maybe that's another Discover session. We don't have time today to tell you lead sheets. For example, you can now in the key signatures, you can hide key signatures after the first system. You can hide the clefs after the first system. I don't like either of these two options, to be honest. So you only show them at the beginning and then you don't show them later on. There's just an option for that. If you're doing this kind of real book lead sheet, you can do those as well. I don't have time to tell you that if you're using the Shift X option and you're typing text and things in here, if you right click, then you can insert music text and you can use this new dialogue, and you can find the recently used, these are the common ones. It will show you recently used ones you've used, and you can search through all sorts of things, and you can look through all of the things that exist in Smoothall to find the symbol that you want, so that it's just an easier way to put in a symbol if you need it. Don't have time for that. You can remove rests in drum parts. Did I already say that? I might have. If you're editing drum parts and you've just got some rests that you don't need because of the way Dorico's put those together, you can click on them and remove those. You can add cues to drum parts now. You don't have to use the workaround I showed a couple of years ago. There's some sketch instruments. So in setup mode, when you're adding new players, there's a sketch set of instruments for just a bass staff, just a grand staff, just a strings staff. I'll work on the stuff later. Those kind of sketch instruments are there as well. There's a new remote control API, which most of you won't want, but companies like Stream Deck, Notation Central people, and Metagrid, they will now be able to, if they want to, drive Dorico. Instead of just using a shortcut, so the Stream Deck would send a shortcut for something, it can go straight to the command, which will also make it much easier for them to roll out things in multiple languages because they're accessing the command rather than a shortcut that exists in a specific language. There's some new changes to Dorico Elements. So Dorico Elements previously had a 12-player limit, and it now has a 24-player limit. So if you were using our big band template, in the jazz section, I couldn't see it then, the big band template, which has 17 players, for example, you couldn't have used that previously in Dorico Elements, and you now can. Dorico Elements will also now have an Engrave mode. It doesn't have all of these options, and you can't do page templates in Engrave mode in Elements, but you can graphically move things. So you now have the graphical editing control. If you just need to make a small tweak to something, then that's now available along with more players in Dorico Elements. In fact, many of the things I've talked about today are available in Dorico Elements, apart from the library manager, I guess. And also, of course, there's a new Dorico SE4 is also still free and available from today. So right up to 2 players. If you already have a license for Dorico SE and you want a Dorico SE4 license, then just go to dorico.com/SE and get a new license for Dorico 4. The trial will be available in a couple of weeks. So if you want to wait, or if you're watching this later, sometime towards the end of January 2022, the trial will be available. Standard Steinberg policy, it's always a couple of weeks before the trial is available. If you want to purchase the update to Dorico, if you're on Dorico 3.5, then it's $99.99 dollars or euros. If you're on Dorico, an earlier version, so anything from 1 to 3.0, then it's $159.99. There's a grace period. It's often normally only a month, of course, but the grace period for Dorico 4 was quite long. So if you bought Dorico, or you upgraded Dorico after the 25th of August 2021, you get a free version of Dorico 4, and you will either get some information about that by email, or if you just want to check out our blog, blog.dorico.com. In fact, let me just bring some of these up. There's a big blog article from Daniel about lots of things in Dorico 4, and it also links to Anthony's videos, so they're all in here as well. Loads of information in here about each of the features that we've shown you today. Also, some things about licensing, but at the bottom, it also tells you the version history PDF. If you would like to read absolutely all the details, your bedtime reading, and it is bedtime reading because it's apparently about the same size as The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, the C.S. Lewis children's book. So the version history, just for version 4, is available to download there as a PDF. It's 103 pages. There's also the system requirements, the pricing and availability, and the grace period details. So if you're not sure about anything to do with the grace period, you can check that. And you can also, of course, get in touch with us on the forum. So dorico.com/forum, or on one of the Facebook groups, or your favourite method. And don't forget to check out Anthony's videos on youtube.com/Dorico. If you'd like to see somebody else's review, then I noticed Scoring Notes already have their review available. This one is also quite long. The Scoring Notes review is 1,300 words, I think. So it's quite comprehensive, and it will include lots of the things that I haven't had time to tell you about today. So it's available from today, 12th of January 2022, and you can check out our blog if you want any more details about where, grace period, how, anything like that. I'm just going to have a quick look at the chat to see if there's anything obvious in there that hasn't already been answered. It looks like there's quite a lot in it, in the chat. Dorico 4 is not going to overwrite Dorico 3.5, so if you still want to use Dorico 3.5, if you've got a project that you're doing in it, you can still do that in version 3.5. Dorico 4 can coexist with it quite happily. I think on this computer I've got lots of previous versions, so yes, it can coexist quite happily. It's moving too fast at the moment for me to keep up with all of that, but I can see that Daniel is. So if you have any comments, then you can write them in the chat. Of course, the chat's going to stop working a minute or two after this live stream finishes, so you can write comments under that video, but please come and visit us on our forum instead, because it's often a better way for us to get in touch with you, or send a support ticket if you've got anything you need to send us as well, because there is a better way of interacting than just writing in the chat. So dorico.com/forum if you want to chat to us in there. So I'm sure there are other things that maybe you would like to include in Dorico, and we'd love to hear from you about those. But you can see there's an awful lot in this new version of Dorico. So I hope you will enjoy using this one. And thank you for joining this live session. I'll see you all on the next one. I imagine towards the end of this month, we'll do a Discover session on one of the new features in Dorico 4. So what's your favourite? Let me know, and we can maybe discuss that in the next Discover Dorico session. Thank you.